We're going to start with finger PIP and DIP flexion together. You can test the fingers together unless the client has a nerve or a tendon injury. Then you want to test the fingers individually. But we're going to start with them together, and the prime movers are the flexor digitorum superficialis and the flexor digitorum profundus. You want to start with the client with their forearm in supination, their wrist in neutral, and their fingers relaxed. And then you want to ask the client to touch the pads of their fingers to the distal surface of their palm. So go ahead and touch the pads of your fingers to your palm. Fantastic. Now, in order to provide resistance, because she made the full range of motion, she gets a 3. In order to provide resistance, you're going to put one finger between the palm and the fingers themselves, the middle phalange. And then you're going to provide resistance and ask the client not to let your fingers be pushed upwards. So I'm going to give you some resistance. Don't let me move your fingers. All right, perfect. So she gets a grade of 5. If I was not able to give her full max resistance but only moderate resistance, she would get a grade of 4. And if I couldn't give her any resistance but she still made the complete motion against gravity, she would get a grade of 3. Now for grades 2 or below, you want to test the individual fingers. So we'll move on to the individual PIP and DIP flexion for those exercises. In these tests, stabilization is provided by the hand physician. For isolated PIP flexion, again, you want your client with their forearm supinated, their wrist in neutral, and you're going to want their fingers relaxed, and the only finger that is any different is going to be the finger you're testing, where the MCP joint will be a little bit flexed. And it's going to be a little bit flexed because you're going to use your hand to hold down all of the other fingers. So you want to isolate this one finger and then ask your client to bend at that one knuckle, bring their finger in towards their palm. All right, great job. Now, in order to make sure that the DIP is not in extension right now, you're actually going to want to use your thumb to really gently flick the tip of the finger and just make sure that it's got some nice loose movement there. Now right now, she's already got a grade of 3, bringing it up against gravity. So I'm going to give you some resistance right now. Don't let me move your finger. Okay, she did a great job. Against maximal resistance, she got a grade of 5. If I only had to give moderate resistance, it would be a grade of 4. And just completing the range of motion against gravity gives her a 3. So now we're going to show you what the positioning and testing is for a range 2 and below. Repeat these tests for the other fingers if the need is indicated. When testing for finger PIP flexion for a grade 2 or lower, you're going to want your client seated with their forearm in mid position, and you want their fingers extended except for the one finger being tested, which you're going to want bent just at the MCP joint, just like with grade 3, 4, or 5. And I'm going to palpate right here on the flexor digitorum superficialis, and I'm going to ask the client to flex the tested finger towards her palm. So go ahead and flex your finger towards your palm. All right, fantastic. Now, because she can flex her finger towards her palm against or without gravity, she gets a grade of 2. If she was not able to flex her finger against gravity at all, but I could still palpate and feel some contractile movement in the flexor digitorum superficialis, she would get a grade of 1. And if there was no contractile motion was palpated, then she would get a grade of 0 for finger PIP flexion. When testing finger DIP flexion, you want your client seated with their forearm in supination, their wrist in neutral position, and their fingers relaxed. You want to be in front of your client, and you want to test each finger individually by taking hold of the middle phalanx of the finger to be tested, and grip it with the pads of your fingers on either side, and ask the client to bend the finger upwards, just that last digit. So go ahead and bend your finger upwards. Perfect. So you get full range of motion, so she gets a 3. And then you want to provide resistance against the direction of extension with your finger. So go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and flex. I'm going to give you some resistance. Don't let me push your finger down. So go ahead and flex. All right. Terrific. So you get a grade of 5. You flexed against it against maximum resistance. If she was only able to flex against moderate resistance, she would get a grade of 4. And being able to complete the action at all against gravity gives her a grade of 3. So now we're going to move on to finger DIP flexion for grades 2 or lower. When casting finger DIP flexion, again, for grade 2 or lower, you want to position your client so that you eliminate gravity by having their forearm in mid position and their fingers relaxed. You're going to grip the finger being tested at the middle phalanx on either side and ask your client to flex their finger towards their palm, just the distal digit. And you want to palpate on the flexor digitorum profundus. So go ahead and flex your last digit towards your finger. Perfect. Perfect. All right, so she was able to move, get full range of motion with gravity eliminated, so that would be a 2. If she was not able to get full range of motion, but I did palpate some contraction at the flexor digitorum profundus, it would be a grade of 1.
And if there was no movement and no palpable contraction, it would be a grade of 0.
So next we're on to the metacarpophalangeal extension. And for this position, the therapist is going to be seated on the same side that they're going to be testing. So this is my hand over here on the left, and this is my client, or my little brother, over on the right. So what we're going to start with is the hand is going to be pronated on the table so that the volar side of the hand is flat, and the interphalangeal joints of the finger can be slightly flexed for comfort at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to show them, okay, I'm going to move my hand into extension like this with my fingers. Can you do that too? Okay, so he's able to in the gravity, in the portion of this test where gravity is factored in, and so he will score a 3 at this point. If he was not able to, we would move on to the 2, 1, and 0 testing, which are done in gravity eliminated positions. But since he is able to, we're instead going to test for a 4 or 5, which is him working against extra resistance, which is provided by us. So this time we're going to take the hand that's not providing resistance and slide it over so that all 4 fingers are underneath the hand, supporting him off of the surface this time. And we're going to have our thumb looped around the dorsal side of the hand this time, covering the metacarpals for stability, while the other fingers are covering the volar side of the hand. We're going to have him move into resistance again with his fingers, just like that, perfect. And we're going to put one finger right here on the proximal phalanx of the metacarpal, and we're going to provide resistance. Don't let me move you. Perfect. So as you can see, he's able to do maximum resistance at that point, which means that he would score a 5. If there was some give, but then he was able to adjust and we reduced the pressure to moderate or strong, then he would score a 4. So if he had not been able to, now we'll show the gravity eliminated position for extension, which is like this. So the wrist is in neutral with the thumb to the sky and the ulnar side of the hand down. And again, we're going to provide support right here, like this. And we're going to say, okay, can you move your fingers into extension? So if he is able to move his fingers into extension at this point in time, like that, he completes the full range of motion. That's a score of 2 because he was able to do the full range of motion in the gravity eliminated position. So you can relax now. If he's not able to, what we would do is we would palpate. So you would go to one of the extensor digitorum muscles right here where they overlap with the metacarpals, and we would have him do the same motion again. So as you can see, he is able to do it, but if he wasn't, you would probably feel this flex, which would be a score of 1. If you don't feel it flex, then it's a score of 0. Metacarpophalangeal extension is handled by the extensor digitorum muscles, the extensor digiti minimi, the extensor indices, the dorsal interossei, the palmar interossei, and the lumbricals, which are found on the volar side of the hand. Thank you all, and we'll see you in class to try all of this out. Okay, so I'm going to be taking care of the metacarpophalangeal flexion for this part of the assignment. And so what we're going to start with is the client with their palm and their forearm fully supinated so that the dorsal side of the hand is flat on the table and the volar side is facing the sky. And what we're going to have them do is we're going to show them the fingers moving in deflection like this, and we're going to say, can you do this as well? Okay, so he is able to. That means that he's a 3, which means that he's capable of doing this against gravity's resistance. So if he wasn't able to at this time, we would move to a gravity eliminated position, which would be like 2 or 1 or 0. But since he's able to, we're going to go ahead and test for a 5 or a 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hand that's not providing resistance, and I'm going to place it on the opposite side of the hand from his thumb, so that all but the thumb are on the dorsal side of the hand, and the thumb comes across the volar aspect of the hand and covers the metacarpals like a seatbelt. And then we're going to have him move back into flexion. If you can move into flexion, thank you. And then we're going to take one finger and put it against the proximal phalanx. We're going to say, don't let me move you. And we're going to push while he resists. Okay, good. So he was able to resist at maximal force. So that means that he scores a 5 on that. If there was some give, but then he was able to after we adjusted for moderate or strong force, that would be a 4. So assuming he's not able to do the gravity resistance position, which was the 3 that we initially saw, we would move into gravity eliminated position, which starts the testing for 2, 1, and 0. So at this point, we would move their hand so that the ulnar side of the wrist is down against the table. And again, we're going to take the palm and wrap it, our palm, and wrap it so that all but the thumb is on the volar side this time, and the thumb is wrapped over the metacarpals on the dorsal side. And we're going to have him move back into flexion if he's able. So he is able to complete the full range of motion in the gravity eliminated position, which is a 2. And at this point, if that wasn't capable of happening, we would put our finger right here on the web space, and we would have him move again into flexion. So if you can move into flexion again. So right around here, you should feel the first dorsal interossei activate, which is what you want to be palpating. So if you feel that activate, then he scores a 1. If you don't, he scores a 0. The muscles that are responsible for metacarpal phalangeal flexion are the flexor digitorum profundus, the flexor digitorum superficialis, the flexor digiti minimi, the palmar interossei, the dorsal interossei, and the lumbricals. Thank you.
Okay, so first we're going to demonstrate finger abduction. The client will be seated with their arm resting on the table, forearms pronated, wrist is in neutral position, fingers are extended, and in adduction, adduction. MCP joints are in neutral and avoid any hyperextension. So the muscles that will be tested today are the dorsal interossei muscles and the abductor digiti minimi, and we want to see a range of motion anywhere from 0 to 20 degrees. So for abduction of individual fingers using the dorsal interossei muscle, it's going to be abduction of the ring finger towards the pinky, abduction of the middle finger towards the ring finger, abduction of the middle finger towards the index, and abduction of the index finger towards the thumb. For abduction of the fifth finger, the pinky, it's going to be away from the ring finger, and that's done through the abductor digiti minimi. Okay, so first we're going to start off with grade 3 resistance. That one actually is no resistance applied. So this is going to be where the client demonstrates abduction alone, no resistance. So that means they were unable to hold the abduction position with resistance applied. So that means they failed grades 4 and 5. So I'm going to have the client start off with their fingers adducted, just like this. Okay? So move your fingers according to my instruction. Move your pinky away from your ring finger. Perfect. Move your ring finger towards your pinky. Good. Move your middle finger towards your ring finger. Good. Move your middle finger towards your index finger. Good. Move your index finger towards your thumb. Okay, good. So that was a grade 3. So grades 4 and 5 will be to maintain the test position with some added resistance. 5 is strong resistance, 4 is moderate. But with the fingers, you're not going to be applying that much resistance as you would with any muscles in the rest of the body. So I'm going to be adding resistance to the distal phalanx of each finger on the radial side of the finger and the ulnar side of the adjacent finger. I'm going to have the client start off with her fingers abducted, so separated. Okay, so hold your fingers apart and don't let me push them together. Okay. Okay. Perfect. So this client got a grade 5, and then for grade 4, I just do slightly less resistance. So I would give my client a grade 2 if they were only able to show me a partial finger abduction, so a range of motion of around 10 degrees. I would start off with the fingers adducted, so together, and instruct just as I did for grade 3. But for the sake of time, we'll just demonstrate on one finger for grade 2. So for this one, you're just going to do a little movement, less than before. So move your pinky away from your ring finger. So that one, it was just a partial abduction, so that's a grade 2. Okay, and for grade 1, I would ask the client to abduct her fingers, but there would be no visible movement. So she'll have 0 range of motion. But I would palpate, and I should be able to feel a contraction on the first dorsal interossi muscle and the abductor digiti minimi. So right here. Okay, now I'm going to be showing finger adduction. So the client, same position, seated with their arm resting on the table, forearm pronated, wrist is in neutral position. Fingers start in extension and adduction, so all together. MCP joints are in neutral and avoid flexion. The muscles that will be tested today are the palmar interossi muscles, and we want to see a range of motion from 20 to 0 degrees. For adduction of the fingers, we'll be demonstrating adduction of the little finger towards the ring finger towards the middle finger, adduction of the index finger towards the middle finger, and adduction of the thumb towards the index finger. So basically you want all the fingers going towards the middle. So we'll start off with grade 3, and that's going to be where the client demonstrates adduction alone without any resistance applied. This means they were unable to hold the adduction position with resistance applied, meaning they failed grades 4 and 5. I'm going to have the client start off with her fingers abducted, so separated. Okay, follow my instructions. Move your pinky towards your ring finger. Nice. Move your ring finger towards your middle finger. Move your index finger towards your middle finger. Move your thumb towards your index finger. So what I demonstrated was an individual demonstration of each finger. If not, I could simply have her adduct all towards her middle finger. So I could just say, move your fingers towards your middle finger. Nice. For grades 4 and 5, they'll be able to maintain the test position with some added resistance. I'll be adding resistance by grasping the middle phalanx on each of the 2 adjoining fingers and try to pull the finger in the direction of abduction for each finger tested. The client will start with fingers in adduction like this. Okay, hold your fingers together and don't let me pull them apart. So I'm going to lift it a little and just apply a little resistance. Okay. Nice, so she got a grade 5, and for grade 4 it would be slightly less resistance. For grade 2, I would give my client a grade 2 if they were only able to show me a partial finger adduction, so a range of motion of around 10 degrees. I would start off with fingers abducted, so separated. And instruct just as I did for grade 3, but for the sake of time, we'll just demonstrate on one finger for grade 2. So this one's just going to be slightly less. So move your ring finger towards your middle finger. Move your ring finger towards your middle finger. Okay, good. So that was just a partial range of motion. She couldn't go all the way, so that would be a grade 2. For grade 1, I would ask the client to adduct her fingers, but there would be no visible movement, so 0 range of motion. Palpation of the palmar interossi is rarely feasible, So I would place my finger against the side of a finger to be tested. So for example, if I wanted to test her index finger, adducting to her middle finger, I would put my finger here, give my instruction, move your index to your middle finger, but she won't be able to move it with a grade 1, and I may be able to detect a slight shudder of movement.